our bone might still be recovered.
Whenever you bring up something from the deep ocean, you always find interesting things. So we're guaranteed interesting things.
I think that's one of the exciting things about this science. You never know what you're going to get. It's there, it's there, yes. It's there. That's it. Ah. There's the bone.
Oh my God.
They haven't fallen off.
They haven't fallen off. There's one large vertebrae and we've got a few smaller ones.
Fin whale vertebra. Minke whale next to it, you can see.
That's right.
So it's like a sweet assortment for worms.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah, pop them in there.
Kim and Adrian are quick off the mark to get to their bone. And they certainly seem excited about something.
So we've got bacterial mats. This is the white stuff there. We've got gastropods. We've got bryozoans. We've got nudibranch sea slugs. We've got mollusks.
Have you found any snot flowers?
No snot flowers yet. We found quite a few interesting animals though. Little something that we've been picking out. So this is
wow, look at that, a little mini lobster.
Squat lobsters. We have sea urchins.
But you're missing out this guy. I mean, what's this strange creature in the middle?
Little spider crab. A lot of these animals are things which live on sort of hard substrates or hard things in the the marine environment. So we've actually got quite a lot of organisms here able to use the whale bone as if it was a kind of a reef, really. I mean, no one's done this experiment, so no one knows. So whatever we get is interesting.
Even though I haven't seen any bone-eating snot flowers today, my eyes have been opened to a new world. That something as barren-looking as a whale skeleton is actually an island home to a whole community of extraordinary creatures. Just off our coast, deep on the seabed, there's a delicate ecosystem at work that we know so little about.
On their restless journey through the oceans, whales navigate their way past these islands. But I can't resist a stop at Cana. I'm always captivated by these clumps of rock and grass that seem to defy the surrounding sea. Each of these islands is unique, its own little world, a miniature ecosystem where people, plants and animals have to learn to live together. But things haven't always gone smoothly. The sea eagles, which used to soar high above these cliffs, were hunted to extinction. By 1918, there wasn't a sea eagle to be seen on Cana. Since then, many people have left too. There's only about 20 full-time residents now. But the sea eagles have been brought back. It's Abby Patterson's job to watch over them.
Cana's a good place because it's a very wild and remote island. There's plenty of food here, plenty of rabbits for the eagles to actually feed on. So, and it's also a place that isn't disturbed very much. Very few people come to this corner of the island. So the birds are left alone, and that's really what they need. So no disturbance and plenty of food.
The sea eagles may feel at home on Cana, but they had to be reintroduced from Norway. Back in 1975, RSPB volunteers were scaling Norway's mountains. As the eagles were doing well there, it was safe to remove a number of the enormous chicks. The chicks were then flown to Scotland and released on the island of Rum, right next to Cana. At that time, no one could have anticipated how successful the reintroduction was going to be.
Overall in Scotland, there's probably about 200 at this present time.
And how many of those are on Cana?
Well, they have two pair here. Right. They've been here since probably the late 80s and probably came from Rum and moved across to Cana. And they've been fairly successful since then. One pair better than the other pair, as you always get.
And is there anywhere here that we can see signs of sea eagles today?
Yes, there is. Just in the cliff up behind me, we should hopefully see some signs anyway.
Cliff. That sounds ominous. In this exposed terrain, finding any sign of the sea eagles isn't easy. We're going to check a recently vacated nest to see if they're eating well enough to survive. What I hadn't bargained on was the nest being halfway up this cliff. You do a lot of this, do you?
Occasionally, not too much these days, but in the old days I did quite a lot.
You know I've never done this before, don't you?
Aye, I know.
I'd like you to know that I'm quite liking it, but mostly I'm hating it. This is not the best fun I've ever had. Let me assure you. Oh, I'm here. I'm here. Oh, I'm so pleased. Right. Jolly good. Okay. I have to say, right, at first sight, this does not look like a bird's nest as such to me. Is this standard issue, just a flattened platform of debris?
This is it, yes. It's quite often it's built up at the beginning of the season. It looks a lot better. You know, there's a lot of sticks and seaweed and various other things. And then it lines it a little bit with heather and various things like that. By the end of the season, of course, the birds have been here, you know, for several months.
Right.
So by the time they are finished with this, it's as you see it now.
What is that? That's a jawbone.
This is a jawbone, yes. It's not human, I can say, but what this is, it's herbivore.
Yeah.
And that's a small lamb.
It's a lamb, right?
A small lamb.
Because that is the kind of prey you kind of, in your mind's eye, that's what I think about, something like a seagull taking.
Yes, that's right. There's a tendency that, you know, obviously the seagulls are not liked by shepherds, etc., because they are taking lamb. And in some of these areas, financial schemes have been set up to try and offset some of these costs. But here on Cana, looking at the actual dietary requirements of the eagle, there's only something like 0.2% of lamb amongst everything that it eats is eaten. Now that's not a large amount.
We know from the nest the eagles are feeding well enough, which promises well for their future. But still no sign of the birds. Until, finally, it's iconic, isn't it? See it against the coolness sky.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a backdrop.
Well, you couldn't get a finer backdrop.
It's going to come right past us.
Yes. Just to be sitting in a day's visit to catch a sight like that, fantastic.
So, just how big is that bird that we're looking at?
Well, it's the largest bird of prey we've got in the UK, and that's an 8-foot wingspan approximately. So that is huge, and it's often described as a flying barn door, you know.
Well, isn't it the size of a door in somebody's house, isn't it? I mean, 8 foot.
It's very big, but it's also very broad, a very, very broad wing. So they're absolutely massive birds, and there's different sizes between male and female. You find the female is a much bigger bird than the male.
That was amazing, though.
That was great.
I didn't think we'd see anything, to be honest with you.
I was a bit dubious myself about it, but I'm really happy that it's come by for us.
The sea eagle chicks aren't the only Norwegians to make their home in Scotland. The Hebrides were ruled by the Vikings for over 250 years. In fact, the Gaelic name for the islands, Inishgal, means the islands of the foreigners. But the Norwegians here today haven't come to conquer, they've come to work. I'm hitching a ride north on a boat based here in the west coast of Scotland. It's operated by a Norwegian company who farm Atlantic salmon here, mostly for the UK market. The boat's skipper, Roy Willie Hansen, doesn't seem to mind being far from Norwegian shores.
It's quite interesting to see how the people and the coast are very much the same. People living near the coast seems to me like being very much the same people.
So this place, this coastline makes you feel at home?
Yeah, it does, actually. Yeah, I feel home.
Age-old Viking bonds run deep among the seafaring folk here. But the modern world is forcing change on these islands. Try taking a trip out to the Isle of Skye and you'll see concrete signs of progress. The bridge reaching out to one of Scotland's most famous islands has only been here since 1995. It's just a thin ribbon of road, but it's a permanent connection to the mainland. It begs the question, is Skye an island anymore? Members of the local community own and run a ferry further down the coast for those who prefer going over the sea to Skye. Alice Roberts is one of them.
Well, the boats have changed over the years, but this journey still connects back to the age-old tradition of the Isles when everything, people, goods, animals, had to come across on the water. I'm meeting Donald John MacLeod, who brought the mail across this narrow stretch of water for 50 years. He's witnessed firsthand how Skye has changed since the arrival of the bridge.
When an island is connected by a causeway or a bridge, the island changes. An island community, they're dependent on each other, but now you can get off it 24/7. Go to wherever in the world.
And you used to bring the mail over to Skye?
Yes, I did. Up to the Second World War, very few houses had telephones, so everything came by mail.
So it sounds like your boat was a bit of a lifeline for people.
Oh
in
yes,
Skye.
it was at that time, absolute lifeline, yes.
And how important are boats now, do you think?
Tourist attractions.
This stretch of water wasn't just a lifeline for communication, it was once essential for industry too. Running any kind of enterprise on the Isles used to rely on sea trade, and 200 years ago, the business on the boats was booming. The island looks so unspoilt. Hard to believe that the smog of pollution once hung over these shores, and that an entire industry was born and died here, all based on the stuff under my feet. This is brown gold, seaweed. Now, strange as it seems, there are chemicals in this that 200 years ago were crucial to the glass-making industry. To make glass, you need soda ash. Until the late 1700s, Britain's main source for that was Spain. But then came war with Napoleon, and all imports stopped. Shattering news for the glass industry. Except you can also get soda ash from burning seaweed, and that was the start of the brown gold rush. The beaches of the Western Isles are abundant in the seaweed or kelp. When burned, it produces soda ash. So 200 years ago, these quiet shorelines were ablaze with activity. The remains of the workers' cottages can still be seen. As the kelp industry boomed, they housed entire families that depended on the seaweed for their livelihood. Whatever the weather, they had to be outdoors, cutting, carrying, and burning it. I want to know what life was like in the early 1800s for the people of Skye working the kelp. So I'm meeting historian Donald William Stewart on this desolate day.
It was a grim task, arduous work, really. You'd be there knee-deep in freezing cold salt water for most of the summer months, sewing this stuff up. Then you'd have to drag it or haul it or carry it, back-breaking work up to the top of the shore where you'd clean it, you'd dry it. Then you put it over pits and you burnt it.
And is this men and women working in
Well,
this?
the women apparently did the burning, if you like. It was quite a skilled job. You couldn't burn it too fast. The men, well, they took up kelp irons and beat this molten seaweed into blocks, cooled down into bluish lumps, which were then broken up into chunks and taken down to the south.
They're ruins now, but around 200 years ago, these coastal houses were hives of activity. Piles of seaweed burning along the shore, covering the islands in thick smoke, visible for miles out to sea.
20,000 people across the Western Islands were involved every summer in this really grim, filthy, dirty work. Just as much a product of the Industrial Revolution as the black coal smoke which is belching out of the chimneys in Glasgow and Birmingham and Manchester.